Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name's Grant. I've spent most of my adult life on the water, sailing, fixing up old boats, and running small charters along the Gulf Coast. I never cared much for the noise of cities or the rush of crowds. Give me salt air, open waves, and the dull creak of rope in the wind over anything else. 3 nights ago, I pushed off from a sleepy marina near Clearwater, planning a solo trip down the coast. Just me, a 40-foot trawler named Seabird, and a cooler full of food. I had stocked up on supplies, filled both fuel tanks, and topped off the water. My plan was to float south, drop anchor near a few hidden inlets, and catch some quiet for once. No calls, no news, just the water. It was supposed to be peaceful. The storm wasn't on the radar, and that's what kept nagging at me. At around 2 a.m., I was woken up by thunder. Low, distant, but growing. I climbed out of the bunk and stepped out onto the deck. The sky was black, and lightning forked far out near the horizon. A strange flickering orange glow lit up the clouds, like fire behind a veil. I felt uneasy. No signal on my phone, not even a bar. Strange, since I was within 10 miles of shore. The storm, I figured, might have disrupted the towers. I powered up the VHF, scanning through channels. Static, then something. All stations. Do not approach populated areas. Emergency declaration in effect. The voice was warped, broken by interference. I leaned in. Lockdown, infected, spreading by contact, remain isolated, repeat, remain isolated. I froze. Infected. The storm hit before I could process more. Rain slammed into the deck like thrown nails. Wind howled like it had teeth. I scrambled back inside and sealed the hatch. The boat rocked hard, lightning cracked, showing something on the horizon, something burning. A distant shoreline engulfed in orange flame. I didn't sleep. I sat at the wheel in silence, hand gripping the throttle, heart racing. My gut told me something was wrong. Not just the weather. Something bigger. By sunrise, the storm had passed. I killed the engine around 6 a.m. and let the boat drift about half a mile off a marina I'd planned to refuel at. It was one I knew, small, quiet, family-owned, but now it was different. I saw no boats, no workers, not even the regular seagulls. What I did see made my stomach sink. A sailboat was half sunk near the dock, its hull cracked open. Another fishing boat, usually kept tied near the end of the pier, floated aimlessly in circles. As I watched through the binoculars, I spotted something near the fueling station. Someone stumbling. At first, I thought they were drunk or hurt. They dragged their foot, arms limp, head tilted back. Then I saw another, also walking wrong. Then a third, crawling. I looked closer. One of them had what looked like dark stains down his shirt soaked through. Another had what I swear was part of a rope tangled in her hair. No, not a rope. Hair from someone else. And none of them seemed aware. Not like normal people. I backed away from the window. This wasn't some random incident. This was something bad, something spreading. I turned the VHF back on. Dead air. The silence felt louder than the storm had. By 7:30 a.m., I decided to head further out to sea. My thoughts raced. If there was some kind of outbreak, like the voice on the radio said, something spreading through contact, being on a boat might be the safest place in the world. I had food, water, fuel. I just needed to stay calm. But as I steered away from shore, I noticed a small dinghy in the distance, drifting aimlessly. Someone was inside. I raised the binoculars again. A man slumped over the edge, not moving. Part of me wanted to help, but the fear in my chest, cold, heavy, told me to keep moving. Then the man jerked upright. He began thrashing wildly, arms reaching out, as if trying to grab something that wasn't there. I could hear his voice even over the waves, a deep, distorted groan that didn't sound fully human. I cut the throttle and turned hard, veering away from the dinghy. The man threw himself from the boat into the water and started swimming, toward me. But he didn't swim right. His strokes were uneven, twitchy. He moved fast, way too fast for someone flailing that way. I gunned the throttle and left him behind, heart hammering. I didn't look back. I anchored 8 miles out by 9 a.m., far from anything. The water was calm again, almost too calm. I took stock of what I had, about a week's worth of food if I rationed, water for 5 or 6 days, and nearly full fuel reserves. I still had no signal, no idea what had happened inland. But I had eyes, and they had seen enough. Something awful had started, and I was stuck watching it unfold from the water. That might have saved me. Or maybe it just delayed the inevitable. The ocean had never felt this empty. I sat in the captain's chair, seabird bobbing slowly in the glassy water. The silence around me broken only by the occasional groan of metal or creak of rope. The kind of sounds that are normally calming at sea, but today they scraped at my nerves. I tried the VHF again. Nothing but static, switched frequencies, clicked over to channel 16, the emergency line, and then I heard it. A voice, crackling through the interference, weak and broken. If anyone hears this, please. We're stuck on the Tide Runner 20 miles southwest. Engine failure. We need help. The voice was young, desperate. Please. They're everywhere. A pop of static ended the transmission. My hands tightened on the wheel. 20 miles southwest was deep water. If someone was out there, alive, they'd need help soon. The ocean doesn't forgive mechanical problems. And if those things were spreading that far out, I needed to know what I was up against. I weighed my options. I had fuel to spare and speed to burn. If I didn't go, who would? I punched the throttle and turned seabird toward the coordinates. By 10 a.m., the sky was beginning to shift, clouds rolling in again, darkening the horizon. I spotted the Tide Runner just before the squall arrived. A medium-sized catamaran, motionless in the water. Its sails were torn, the hull streaked with dark marks that looked like burns or impact damage. A dinghy hung off the back, deflated and useless. I slowed my approach and grabbed the megaphone. Tide Runner, this is the Seabird. Do you copy? Anyone aboard? Movement on the deck. 2 people emerged from the cabin. A young man and a girl, maybe in her late teens. Both looked shaken, pale. The girl clutched a flare gun like a weapon. The man called out, "Thank God. Please, we need to get out of here." I pulled alongside carefully, keeping a good 6 feet of distance. "What happened?" I asked. "What's going on?" "They tried to get us during the night," he said, his voice shaking. 3 of them. Came in on jet skis. We thought they were just drunk, until one of them climbed on board with half his face gone. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The girl's voice broke in. One of them bit Carter. He didn't make it. I scanned the deck, no sign of a third body. "You sure?" I asked cautiously. "Where is he now?" "We buried him," she said, eyes wide. "At sea." The wind was picking up again. I made a choice. "Throw me a line. I'll tow you to safer waters." By 10:30 a.m., I had the Tide Runner lashed to the back of the Seabird and we started east. away from the growing clouds. I kept my radio tuned to channel 16, hoping for more signs of life. The girl, her name was Lena, sat on the bow of her boat, staring at the sea. Her brother, Kevin, paced nervously. "Have you seen any infected?" he asked me, voice low. I nodded slowly. One, in the water. Swam like a machine. He shivered. "It's spreading faster than anyone thought. We tried to go ashore last night up near Sarasota. Everything was chaos, smoke, fire, screaming. We barely got out." I looked over at Lena. "You two holding up okay?" He hesitated. "We're alive. That's all that matters." But something about his tone felt uncertain. At 11:15 a.m., the sky opened up. Rain poured in sheets, drenching the deck. Visibility dropped fast. I called back to Kevin through the megaphone. "We'll need to drop anchor soon. Let the storm pass." He nodded and went below deck. Then, through the downpour, I saw something moving on the Tide Runner's deck. Someone else. I wiped rain from my eyes and focused. A third figure, shirtless, wet, pale. I grabbed the binoculars. He was standing near the stern, swaying. Blood on his chest, mouth open, slack. "Carter." I shouted. "Kevin, he's still on board." No answer. Carter's head snapped toward me like he heard that. His eyes locked on mine. Then he ran, straight at the cabin. I saw Lena scream as the door burst open. I didn't think. I dove into the engine room and yanked the emergency line, cutting the tow rope. The Tide Runner instantly started drifting away as the current caught it. "Lena, jump!" I screamed through the storm. The girl stumbled out of the cabin, a fresh gash down her arm, the flare gun still clutched in her hand. She leapt. I cut the throttle and threw a life ring. She hit the water hard, disappearing into the waves. Seconds passed. Then her hand burst through the surface. I hauled her up onto the deck, soaked and shivering. She looked up at me, blood running from her arm. I tried. I locked the door. But he got out. He wasn't gone. Her lips were blue. The cut on her arm was deep, but not a bite. I looked back at the Tide Runner. It was already vanishing into the curtain of rain. And somewhere inside it, something still moved. I wrapped Lena's arm with a clean rag and used duct tape to keep the pressure steady. She winced, but didn't cry. She just stared off toward the storm where the Tide Runner had vanished. "I didn't want to leave Kevin," she whispered. "You didn't have a choice," I replied quietly. "He would have wanted you to live." She didn't answer. We sat in silence for a while, letting the storm pass over us. It lasted longer than I expected. A gray sheet of rain hung around Seabird, muting the world like a thick curtain. The radio was still silent. My cell still had no signal. The world beyond the boat felt like it had slipped away. At around 12:15 p.m., the wind started to die, and a dull fog settled across the ocean. Visibility improved, but just barely. We were alone again. Or so I thought. I headed below deck to grab more medical supplies, and when I reached the galley, I noticed something strange. The bilge alarm was blinking. I checked the pump, a small automated system meant to keep the lowest part of the hull dry, and realized it had been tripped, which was odd. We hadn't taken on that much water. Curious, I opened the access panel and peered inside. The water was red. For a long second, I just stared. My mind refused to process it, but then I saw it, floating in the bilge water, barely submerged. A tooth, human. I stumbled back, heart racing. I checked the rest of the engine compartment, thinking maybe something had gotten sucked in during Lena's rescue. Maybe something from the Tide Runner drifted aboard. Maybe. Then I saw it. Scratches. Fresh gouges along the inside of the portside hull, claw marks. Long, desperate, like someone had crawled in. Impossible, I thought. No one could survive inside the hull, not unless, I would have noticed. Wouldn't I? I bolted back topside. Lena sat near the bow, wrapped in a towel, staring into the fog. "Did you see anyone else on board?" I asked her. She shook her head. "Just Kevin and Carter. Why?" I hesitated, then lied. "No reason, just being cautious." But I checked the rest of Seabird from top to bottom. Storage lockers, engine bay, water tanks, even the locked cabin where I kept emergency flares and a backup rifle. Everything was sealed. No signs of entry, no signs of anyone else aboard. Just that tooth and those marks. At 1 p.m., the fog finally broke. The sea returned to its usual blue-gray shimmer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something standing on deck. Lana was dozing in the shade, her breathing steady. I hadn't told her about the bilge. Not yet. Instead, I returned to the helm and turned us south. There were a few deep-water mooring buoys along the outer edge of the channel where ships used to wait before coming into port. They were abandoned now, left behind when traffic died down years ago, but I knew where one was, and I figured it'd be as good a place as any to regroup. We reached it by 1:45 p.m. I cut the engine and tied off to the buoy, letting Seabird drift just enough to stay aligned with the current. The silence returned. That's when the knocking started. It came from below, soft, rhythmic, like someone tapping gently on the hull from inside the waterline. Tap, tap, tap. I crept down the stairs and listened at the floor. The sound came again. Not from inside the bilge, but outside. Someone, or something, was beneath the boat. I ran back topside and leaned over the railing. The water was calm, nothing visible. But the knock returned, louder this time, and then a hand. It emerged from the depths like a ghost, pale and bloated, fingers scraping at the hull as it slowly rose towards the surface. I reached for the gaff hook, backing away. Then a face followed the hand, white-eyed, skin shredded, seaweed tangled in its hair. It opened its mouth, not to scream, not to call for help, but to snap at the air. Another surfaced near the stern, then another. 3 of them, clinging to the hull like barnacles, trying to climb. "Lena!" I shouted. She bolted awake, stumbling as she rose. "Get inside now!" She didn't ask questions, just obeyed. I snatched the emergency flare from the overhead box and lit it, hurling it into the water. The red glare spread across the waves, and the creatures recoiled, snarling, gurgling. One let go and sank. The other 2 tried to circle to the back. I grabbed the gaff hook and ran to the stern. One of them was already halfway up the swim ladder. I brought the hook down hard, catching it in the shoulder. It didn't cry out, just fell silently back into the water. I saw the 3rd vanish below the waves, waiting. I cut the mooring line. Seabird roared to life and pulled away fast. I didn't look back. Lena climbed up from below, pale again. "What was it?" she asked. I didn't know how to answer. "There's something wrong with the water," I finally said. "They're not just walking, they're swimming." She looked at me like she already knew. "There's nowhere safe, is there?" she whispered. "No," I replied, "but we're not giving up, not yet." By 2:30 p.m., we were cruising at full throttle, pushing east toward a series of uninhabited barrier islands I knew from old fishing trips. I figured the shallower waters and sandbars might keep the swimmers at bay. But deep down, I was starting to question everything I thought I knew about survival on the sea. First, the bodies floating in the water. Then Carter, walking after they'd claimed he was gone. And now, the ones clawing at my hull from below. Whatever was spreading, it wasn't confined to cities anymore. It had followed the currents. Or maybe it had always been in the water, waiting. Lena hadn't spoken much since the attack. She sat on a bench under the awning, arms crossed tightly, the wind pushing hair across her face. Her skin looked grayish, pale. I checked the wound on her arm. Still sealed, no sign of fever or infection. But I couldn't stop watching her. Because I didn't trust anything anymore. Around 3 p.m., we reached the largest of the barrier islands, little more than a crescent of sand, maybe 100 yards across, with 2 dead trees rising like skeleton fingers from the center. I dropped anchor a dozen yards offshore. The tide was low, the water shallow, perfect for keeping things from sneaking up underneath. "Let's rest," I told her. "Stretch our legs. This place looks quiet." She nodded and climbed into the dinghy with me. We rowed together in silence, the waves gentle for once. I tried to convince myself this moment was normal, that we were just 2 travelers on a quiet beach, the world still intact behind us. We reached the shore and stepped into the soft sand. I almost smiled until I saw the footprints. They weren't ours, they were already there, a trail of them, leading from the water up toward the tree line. Barefoot, deep, recent. Lena saw them too. She tensed, pulling the flare gun from her belt. We followed the trail slowly, eyes scanning the trees. And then we found them. 3 boats, small, stripped-down skiffs, all pulled ashore and flipped over. One of them stained, dark streaks smeared across the inside. A makeshift lean-to had been built nearby from fishing net and driftwood. Inside it, a cooler, a bloodied life jacket, and a tattered note. I picked it up, scrawled in smudged marker. "Don't trust the quiet ones. They breathe different." Lena read it too. "What does that mean?" she asked. I didn't have an answer, but I had a suspicion. We returned to the dinghy fast and made it back to Seabird without speaking. I hauled the boat up onto the deck and locked it down tight. Then I double-checked the emergency flares, the food stash, and the extra water tank. Something was off. I looked out across the surf toward the island. And that's when I saw her. A woman standing at the shoreline, alone. She wore a white dress soaked to her knees. Blonde hair draped across her shoulders. She wasn't swaying, wasn't walking, just standing, watching. Her mouth hung open slightly. Her arms dangled at her sides. "Do you see her?" I asked Lena. She stepped up beside me and gasped. Then the woman moved, just 1 step forward into the surf. Then another. Her limbs jerked like someone pulling invisible strings. "Get inside," I said quietly. Lena obeyed. I grabbed the binoculars and focused. The woman's skin was gray, eyes glassy. She wasn't alive. But she wasn't falling either. She walked steadily into the waves, disappearing beneath them. Gone. At 3:45 p.m., the ocean went still again. Too still. That's when I noticed the sound. A low hum, like an engine far away, but not mechanical, more like a drone or vibration. I leaned over the side, listening. It came from the water. I lowered the hydrophone, an underwater mic I used for listening to whales or ship activity, plugged it into the headset. The sound sharpened. Not a hum. A voice. Dozens of voices, overlapping, murmuring just below the surface. Some were crying, some whispering names, others just breathing. Deep, wet, unnatural. I ripped the headset off and threw it down. "Nope," I muttered, "no more of that." Lena stood behind me. "Was it them?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped closer. "Can I tell you something?" I hesitated, then nodded. She held up her arm, the one with the wound. "It's been burning since we left the island. Not like an infection, more like pressure. Like something's inside me." Her voice trembled. "I don't want to become like them." I looked into her eyes, searching for something. Anger, fear, sickness. But I saw only one thing. Resolve. I didn't think she was infected, but I also couldn't explain what was happening. All I knew was this: we were running out of safe places and time. "We keep moving," I told her. "We find somewhere inland, a place with strong walls, and people who still know how to fight." She nodded, but the way she looked at the water, I could tell she wasn't convinced any such place existed. Neither was I. By 4:15 p.m., we left the barrier islands behind. The sun peeked through the clouds for a while, casting a golden sheen across the sea, but the beauty felt artificial, like a trap set by nature to lull us back into comfort. I kept Seabird cruising at steady speed, angling the northeast toward a stretch of coastline with a decommissioned lighthouse. I'd anchored there before during storms. It had high cliffs, dense trees, and a freshwater spring nearby. If anywhere was safe, it'd be there. Lena sat in the cockpit, staring out over the wake. Her skin was flushed now. I didn't like it. "How's the arm?" I asked. "Still aches," she said. "Still feels wrong." "You're not turning," I said firmly, more for myself than for her. "I've seen what that looks like. You're still here." She didn't respond, but I saw the way her fingers curled and uncurled, like she was trying to feel something inside herself, or hold something back. By 4:40 p.m., the radio crackled. Not the usual static or automated alerts. A voice, garbled, distant, but human. I spun the dial, trying to catch it again. Lena leaned forward, listening. "Station Delta. This is Coast Relay 9. Survivors in transit. Repeat, survivors in transit, approaching Cape Raven. Do not engage vessels without signal verification. Over." The voice faded again into fuzz. I slammed my hand down. "Cape Raven," I muttered. "That's inland. Near the old refinery. If that message is real, there are still people." Lena sat up straighter. "Do you trust it?" "No," I said, "but I trust nothing more." I adjusted course and throttled forward. The route would take us through Black Channel, a narrow stretch of water surrounded by sharp, rocky cliffs and overgrown pine. It was beautiful in daylight. At dusk, it looked like something out of a fever dream. Fog clung to the edges. The sky darkened faster than I expected. By 5:15 p.m., the sun was nearly gone. The cliffs rose on either side of us like jaws. That's when we saw the first boat. A skiff, dead in the water, no lights, no movement. I steered wide to avoid it. Then saw the second. This one was closer, a small sailboat. Its canvas torn and dangling. Blood smeared along the side. A foot dangled over the edge, motionless. Lena whispered, "Are they waiting?" I slowed the engine and grabbed the binoculars. There were people on board. Or had been. Now they just sat. Bodies slumped forward or tilted at strange angles, as if they were listening. Or sleeping. But none of them blinked. And all of them had the same open mouths. We crept past them in silence. Not one moved, not one turned. But as we passed, I heard the whispers again, carried across the water like wind through reeds. Lena clutched her head. "Do you hear that?" she gasped. "It's in my ears. It's pulling." I turned up the throttle. The voices rose with the engine. Behind us, one of the corpses stood. Just stood, not chasing, just watching. Lena screamed and dropped to her knees, clutching her head. I yanked her inside and closed the hatch. "Stay here," I ordered. "Don't listen to them. Don't focus on it." "They're calling my name," she whispered. "How do they know my name?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. We cleared Black Channel by 5:45 p.m. The wind picked up again as the cliffs fell behind us. Lena finally stopped trembling. "I think I'm okay," she said. "It faded once we left the channel." "What did they say to you?" She swallowed. "Not in words, just feelings, images. My old apartment, my dog, Kevin." She looked at me. "I think they're baiting people, using memories, using grief." I nodded slowly. "That's how they spread it. Not just through contact, but through longing." She touched her arm. "Then I've already opened the door." "No," I said, "not yet. But you have to be stronger than what they show you." She nodded, but her eyes drifted again toward the sea. Always toward the sea. At 6 p.m. we saw the lighthouse. Tall, lonely, a black silhouette against the deepening orange horizon. I felt something shift in my chest, a spark of hope I hadn't felt since sunrise. I turned us in, guiding Seabird toward a small dock just beneath the cliffs. The shoreline was quiet. No boats, no people. Just the wind and the gulls. We anchored and prepared to go ashore. I gathered the flare gun, the last rifle, and a backpack of essentials. Lena stood beside me, still pale, still shivering, but alive. As I tied off the dinghy, I looked back one more time at the ocean. And that's when I saw it. Far beyond the fog line. A ship. Massive, silent, no lights, no sound. But moving. It glided across the water like a ghost. Its deck was lined with still figures, hundreds of them, just standing, facing the shore. I didn't tell Lena, there was no point. Because whatever that ship was, whatever it carried, wasn't done with us. Not yet. We reached the dock at 6:15 p.m. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a burnt orange sky that faded into deep blue. The lighthouse tower loomed ahead, its glass eye dim. No beam, no sign of life. But I knew this place. Old charts marked it as Cape Ren Light. Decommissioned a decade ago, but occasionally maintained by part-time coastal staff. Maybe, just maybe, someone still lived inside. We made our way up the narrow path carved into the cliffs. Lena moved slower now. Not from exhaustion, but from the weight inside her. She didn't say it, but I knew something had changed. She wasn't fighting the voices as hard anymore. At the top of the hill, the door to the lighthouse stood half open. A soft yellow glow flickered inside. I raised my rifle and stepped through. The first floor was dusty but intact, furniture pushed to the walls, empty food tins piled high. A radio sat on a small table tuned to static. And then, footsteps from the upper level. Someone coughed. Human. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. Then a voice. "You armed?" I lowered the rifle slightly. "Only if you are." A man appeared at the top of the spiral stairs, late 60s, weathered face, one eye fogged with a pale blue film. He wore an old raincoat and carried a flare in one hand. "Thought you were one of them," he muttered, "or worse, one of the floaters." "Floaters?" I asked. He waved us upstairs. The top level had a 360-degree view of the ocean, the cliffs, and the channel we'd come through. A mattress was pushed into the corner, surrounded by stacks of bottled water and old emergency rations. In the center, a telescope mounted to a rusted tripod pointed toward the sea. The man introduced himself only as Grady. Used to maintain these lights in my youth. When everything started going dark, I came back. He eyed Lena. She infected? No, I said quickly. But even as I said it, she swayed on her feet. I'm tired, she whispered, just tired. Grady nodded and handed her a blanket. She curled up near the mattress and was out cold within seconds. I turned to Grady. What are floaters? He adjusted the telescope. The ones who drift in on the tide, they don't swim, they walk along the ocean floor. Get caught in nets, drag seaweed behind them, and rise when they find noise. I swallowed. I saw a ship earlier, I said. Huge. Silent. South of here. Looked full. He stopped moving. I've seen it too. That's not a ship, it's a hive. Grady went quiet for a moment, then he leaned closer. They're not what people think, not some virus or accident. They're ancient. The stories were always there, sirens, wreckers, dead sailors returning in storms. We just gave it a modern name. Then why now? I asked. He shrugged. Maybe we stirred them up with our noise. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment. Doesn't matter anymore. I looked out at the dark ocean. There's a radio signal, I told him. From Cape Raven. Someone's organizing. Maybe we can reach them. Grady grunted. They'll never make it. That signal's bait. What do you mean? He turned and looked me in the eyes. Think about it. A message that clear, repeating on a dead frequency, sounds like hope, but it's just another lure, another trick. At 7 p.m., Lena woke up screaming. Her back arched, her fingers clenched into claws. She was convulsing. Grady reached for a blade. I grabbed his wrist. She's not gone, I yelled. But even I wasn't sure. She gasped and collapsed. I rushed to her side. Her skin was ice cold, eyes fluttering. Then she whispered something, barely audible. They're here. A long, low foghorn bellowed across the sea. We rushed to the window, and there it was again. That massive ship, closer now. Closer than it should have been. No engines, no sails, just moving. And those things on the deck, more of them now. Packed shoulder to shoulder, a floating graveyard that had woken up. Grady handed me a flare gun. We can't let them land. I stared at the flare. You want me to signal them? No, he said, pointing at the base of the cliff. There's an old fuel tank for the dock generators. I keep it full for emergencies. You want to blow it up? He nodded. If they try to dock here, we light it. I looked at Lena. She was barely conscious. I'll do it, I said. I made my way down the cliffside while Grady stayed above, ready to relay directions from the lighthouse. The air had changed. Thicker, saltier, charged. I reached the tank and started prepping it, unscrewing the cap, tying strips of cloth soaked in fuel. I rigged a flare on a 10-second fuse. Then I heard the splash. Not one, many. Feet hitting water. I turned toward the dock. Figures were rising from the sea, soaked. Dripping. Mouths open. Empty eyes reflecting the lighthouse above. They had come ahead of the ship, like scouts, or like bait. And they were between me and the stairs back up the cliff. I raised the flare gun, but I knew, if I used it now, there'd be no firebomb. I'd be lighting my only chance too early. I backed against the fuel tank and reached for the emergency flare. My last one. If I could time it, Grady's voice crackled over the hand radio. They're climbing the south cliff, 3 of them. I can't hold them. I looked up and saw shapes moving along the rock, heading for the lighthouse tower. We were being flanked. I took a breath, lit the fuse. 10 seconds. 9, 8. The nearest one reached for me, fingers like branches soaked in rot. 7, 6, 5. I dove into the surf just as the tank erupted behind me. A tower of fire climbed into the sky. The blast wave hurled me forward, knocking the breath from my lungs. I surfaced, gasping. Above, the cliff lit up like a bonfire. Screams echoed against the stone, not human ones. I swam back to the side of Seabird, half blind from smoke, ears ringing. Lena was waiting at the deck railing, face pale but aware. I pulled myself up with her help. The flames rose high behind us, and beyond the fire, that ship had stopped, just offshore, its deck of watchers still and silent, waiting. The explosion had driven them back, but not far. The massive ship still hovered at the edge of the shallows, unmoving, watching. We stood on the deck of Seabird, faces lit by the orange glow of the burning cliffside behind us. Lena was silent. Grady leaned against the rail, hands shaking, eyes wide. I wasn't sure if it was the cold or the memory of what he'd just seen. "We can't stay here," I said. "No," Grady agreed. "They'll come again. They don't give up." Lena stirred. Her voice was low, raspy. "We need to go inland, get off the water." "We can't," I replied. "The whole coast might be swarmed. The safest place might still be the water." Grady shook his head. "Not anymore. They're adapting. They move in packs now, coordinated, like they're listening to something." He motioned back toward the burning wreck of the lighthouse. "I had a theory," he continued, "about the signal, the one from Cape Raven. I think they use it too." We drifted southwest, hugging the coast. Waves lapped against the hull. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds, and the sea had gone still. Too still. Grady fiddled with the radio, switching between frequencies. Static, then silence. Then, faintly, "All remaining vessels. Redirect, safe harbor. Cape Raven. Repeat." He looked at me. "That message has been repeating every 10 minutes, like clockwork." "It could still be real," I said, trying to believe my own words. "Or it's bait," he said again. But what choice did we have? The ship, the hive, as Grady called it, was still visible behind us. It wasn't pursuing, but it didn't need to. Its mere presence felt like a net tightening around the world. By 9 p.m., clouds had swallowed the stars, and rain began to fall. Cold, misty, constant. The kind of rain that seeps into your bones. Lena had retreated to the cabin. I checked on her every 10 minutes. Her skin was clammy. Her eyes didn't focus right. "She's not one of them," I said aloud, hoping Grady would hear. He didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. Instead, he opened a waterproof case and pulled out a flare. Long, red, and old. "Got one more," he muttered. "We use it only if we're absolutely cornered." Then he pulled out something else. A logbook, water-stained. The pages were warped, but still readable. "What's that?" I asked. "Found it in a bottle. Drifted in a few nights back. Thought it was a prank at first." He handed it to me. The handwriting inside was neat, desperate. "I was aboard the cargo ship Morrow's End. We thought we were ferrying relief supplies. Then the cargo got loose. The crew turned in under an hour. I'm the last one left. They don't breathe. They don't decay. They don't stop. And they whisper when you're not listening. Don't answer them. Don't talk back." I set the engines to drift west. "If anyone finds this, stay away from the ship. It's a trap. The ship itself isn't just a vessel. It's part of them." Grady flipped the book shut. "That's the same one we saw," I said. "Morrow's End." Grady nodded. "If it's drifting, it shouldn't be able to follow us." "It doesn't need to," Lena said from behind us. "We're already marked." She stood in the doorway, soaked in sweat, her pupils wide as coins. "They talk to me," she said, "in dreams, in flashes. I can hear them whispering from under the water." "You're not like them," I said, stepping closer. "I don't know what I am anymore," she whispered. "But I know they won't stop until I'm with them again. Or I'm gone." Then she collapsed. We rushed to catch her before she hit the floor. Grady checked her pulse. "Still here," he said, "but fading." "We need medical supplies," I said. "There's a harbor 20 miles up the coast," he said slowly. "Used to be a fishery. Maybe there's something left." "We'll try it," I said. The journey to the harbor was slow. Fog rolled in thick, curling over the bow like fingers. At 10:30 p.m., we saw the outline of the old dock. Rotting pilings. A half-submerged trawler. A boathouse with a collapsed roof. We tied off Seabird and stepped onto the slippery wood. Grady stayed behind to watch Lena. I took the shotgun and a headlamp. The harbor was dead quiet. No gulls. No wind. Just the creak of wood and the groan of distant tides. Inside the fisheries supply shack, I found dusty boxes of gloves, flashlights, rope, and, thankfully, several sealed first aid kits. I stuffed everything into a dry bag and turned to leave. That's when I saw the mark. A smear on the wall, drawn in something dark. A circle with 3 jagged lines running through it. It wasn't paint, and I'd seen it before. On the deck of Morrow's End. I heard something outside. Not footsteps. Drips, wet skin, the sound of something pulling itself out of the water. I peeked out the broken window. 1 figure stood at the end of the dock, then 2, then 4. They weren't rushing me. They weren't attacking. They were watching. And one of them held something. A flare. The same kind Grady had given me. I bolted out the side of the shack and ran toward Seabird. Shadows darted between the boats. I heard splashes behind me, some chasing, others waiting. I climbed onto the deck, panting. Grady pointed. "You were followed." "I know," I said, dumping the bag and readying the flare gun. "We need to move." Lena sat up on her own. Her eyes were glassy, but she looked at me and whispered, "They're calling for me." I knelt beside her. "Then don't answer. Whatever you hear, don't speak to them." She nodded weakly. The dock creaked. The first figure stepped into view. Then came another. And another. No screams. No rage, just quiet steps. Like a procession. Grady fired the engine. The boat roared to life and we pulled away from the dock, the figure standing at the edge, motionless in the fog. One of them raised its hand slowly and pointed toward the sea. Toward Morrow's End. Back on the water, we headed farther from shore. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became, until the sea was a mirror. I checked on Lena every 5 minutes. She'd stopped speaking, just stared blankly, her mouth moving as if reciting something silently. Grady sat at the wheel, eyes on the horizon. Then, around 11:45 p.m., we saw it. The signal tower of Cape Raven blinking faintly on the horizon. And between us and at Morrow's End. Midnight approached. The sea was still. Before us, the massive silhouette of Morrow's End rose like a tomb from the ocean, barely visible except for its flickering lights, if they could be called lights. They pulsed red and green, like a heartbeat blinking through the fog. Beyond it, faint but unwavering, the signal tower at Cape Raven called out with its mechanical beacon, "On, off, on, off." Grady stood behind the wheel. Lena sat slumped against the cabin wall, her breathing shallow but steady. "We have two options," Grady said. "We skirt the edge of that thing and try for Cape Raven. Or we turn away and disappear into the blue." I stared at the looming vessel. The name Morrow's End was scrawled along the hull in cracked black letters. A fresh mark had been painted beneath it, 3 jagged lines cutting through a circle. The same symbol I'd seen at the harbor, at the lighthouse, on the beach bodies. "They're using it as a relay," Grady muttered. "That ship is broadcasting the same signal we keep hearing. To lure survivors," I added. He nodded grimly. Lena stirred suddenly, her hand shooting out and grabbing mine. "They're here," she whispered. "They're beneath us, below the hull, all around. Don't go near the ship." The waves had gone glassy, too still. No wind, no birds, no sound except the steady hum of the engine and that pulse of light from the distant tower. I scanned the water. Beneath the surface, something shimmered, long shapes rising slowly like shadows breaking free from the dark. Figures, hundreds of them, drifting just below us. "Cut the motor," I said quickly. "What?" Grady asked. "Now. If they're tracking by sound, we just rang the dinner bell." He shut it off. The silence that followed felt like a scream being held back. The boat bobbed gently. Then, something bumped against the hull. Once, twice. Lena was whispering again. Her lips moved, eyes wide and unblinking. I leaned closer and caught her words. "Don't answer. Don't answer. Don't answer." We didn't move for several minutes. The shapes in the water slowly descended again, vanishing like mist swallowed by deeper shadows. We drifted past Morrow's End with sails barely unfurled, letting the current carry us. I looked through the binoculars. No movement on deck, but I knew they were in there, waiting. The ship wasn't just full of them. It was part of them. A floating nest. A trap pretending to be salvation. As we passed its stern, one of the deck lights flickered on by itself. And in the moment it illuminated the railing, I saw a figure standing there. Still. Tall. Wrapped in seaweed and rags. No eyes. Just a mouth. Smiling. The current finally broke free of the ship's pull. Cape Raven was ahead, maybe 5 miles. We started the engine again, briefly, just enough to push clear of the wreck. Then we killed it, unfurled the sail fully, and let the wind guide us. I was starting to think we'd made it through when the radio crackled. It wasn't the automated message anymore. It was something else. A voice, distorted, slow, but unmistakable. "Return, come back. The sea remembers. You belong to us." Grady yanked the cord out of the receiver. "No more of that," he said. Lena finally looked up, eyes focused. "They know we're going to Cape Raven." "What's at the tower?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "It's the source." The signal tower came into view at around 12:30 a.m. The island it sat on was little more than a rock pile, ringed with rusted fencing and concrete slabs. A small dock jutted out from the shore, broken in places. We tied off Seabird and carried Lena up the hill toward the base of the tower. The door to the station building stood open. Inside, lights flickered. Dust hung in the air. But it was powered. A generator thrummed somewhere below. Grady checked the control board. "Still transmitting," he said. I stared at the array of old speakers and dials. "Turn it off." He hesitated, then flipped the main switch. The pulsing light on the tower stopped blinking. The signal fell silent. And for the first time in hours, so did the world. We stayed in that tower until dawn, Lena slept, finally. Grady dozed in a corner, clutching the flare gun. I stood on the roof, watching the sea. Morrow's End was still out there, barely a silhouette now in the morning mist. But it hadn't moved. Maybe we'd cut the thread, disconnected it from whatever hive mind it had been feeding. Maybe we'd just made ourselves invisible for a little while. As the sun rose, pink and gold over a sea that no longer whispered, Lena came to my side. "They're not gone," she said softly. "They're just waiting." I nodded. "Then we keep moving. Keep surviving." She turned toward the west. "Others are still out there. We're not alone." For now, the tower was safe. The signal was dead. But the sea was still full of them. And they remember. They always remember. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.